Okay, I'd like to call this meeting
Seconds to go.
of the Ross Valley Sanitary District to order. Roll call, please.
Borstein,
Yes.
Gaffney,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Meigs,
Here.
Silla.
Here.
And we do the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and that, we're going to now adjourn to closed session.
We'll touch on that.
Okay, we're on. There was nothing to report out from our closed session, and so we're going to go on to number 6 now, approval of agenda.
I move approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Number 7, open time for public to raise items not on agenda or for future agendas. Anyone wishing to address the board of directors on matters within the district's jurisdiction but not on the posted agenda may do so. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. The board may not take action on or discuss items not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements or questions by a member of the public. The board president may refer any matter to staff for further follow-up or elect to have the matter placed on an agenda for a future meeting. Anybody from the public? Seeing none, let's go on to number 8. And this is to conduct a public hearing and consider adoption of resolution 10-19-1566 requesting the local agency formation commission LAFCO to initiate proceedings for reorganization of territory of the Murray Park Sewer Maintenance District in accordance with the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act. Okay, item number 8 is, I read that. I will now open the public hearing on this item. Steve, please give us a little background, please.
Very good. I'll be very brief. And I'd like to introduce Jason Freed, who's the executive director of LAFCO. Did I say that? Are you executive director? Very good. Thank you for joining us for this. And real briefly, this is a public hearing consideration of adopting a resolution of application to the local agency formation commission to initiate proceedings to annex the Murray Park Sewer Maintenance District to the Ross Valley Sanitary District. So, and you see the package here, and Felicia Newhouse, Assistant General Manager, has been working on this, and you want to describe anything further as far as the process?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So the Ross Valley Sanitary District staff has been working very closely with LAFCO staff. We held a community meeting with some of the Marin Park residents actually here in this room in June. And also in concert with some County Marin staff, answered their questions about what the annexation would look like, what the financial implications might be for their sewer service charges, and discussed kind of timing and maintenance responsibilities. I think we answered their questions satisfactorily. I know we did some additional outreach after the fact, actually went out and visited some properties and discussed with them some specific manhole and locations in front of their property and where their wastewater was actually flowing in through the Murray Park Sewer Maintenance District, and then ultimately the wastewater comes into Ross Valley Sanitary District system and then out to CNSA for treatment. So after that public meeting, the County of Marin Board of Supervisors, who is the legislative body for that district, passed a resolution, which is included in the packet here tonight, sometime in September, I think it's September 24th. The concept being that the County of Marin would pass a resolution identical to the Ross Valley Sanitary District Board of Directors resolution. That's why you'll probably see in the packet what looks like duplicate items. That was by design. We wanted to have the exact same resolution, the exact same exhibits that were adopted by the County of Marin. So the only difference being our resolution was going to be different. So beyond that, I'd like to state that this was a business plan goal of the board of directors. And that, as Steve pointed out, Jason's here to answer any questions. LAFCO intends to, after the board considers this meeting tonight, if it does pass, that LAFCO will consider it at a December 12th meeting.
What's the procedure after that?
They,
It goes to the Board of Supervisors, it goes to us, it
Right.
goes to LAFCO, and then
I believe you make an application to the Board of Equalization, the State Board of
Yes, so what occurs,
Equalization.
once we make our determination and it gets finalized, assuming my commission approves it, at that point, it just becomes a paperwork process. We send a copy of everything that's occurred to the county recorder's office. They do a certification of completion. We get that back from them. We then send that to the State Board of Equalization. They then do their filing system, and as far as LAFCO is concerned, the process is done. There's some stuff that still occurs at the state level. You'll notice there's a reason why handover and stuff occurs in a certain way, and some of the language is in there, because in order to get the state to do stuff, you need to be like 7 months before the end of the start of the next fiscal year, and we're not going to hit that deadline. So you will see that from the state's perspective, Murray Park will still exist for 1 more year than it really does, but Ross Valley will take all responsibility for it with the start of the next fiscal year.
What does the Board of Equalization do?
tax. Tax board.
Yeah,
What do
The
they
state
do?
tax board,
State
they collect
tax
taxes. and They,
yeah, they're in charge of all the
it's the IRS of the state.
yeah. I won't. Yeah.
It's the IRS of the state, Internal Revenue
Okay,
Service.
but they don't collect the taxes, the county collects the
But
taxes.
it has to be registered with the state board.
Yeah, the State Board of Equalization registers everything so the county can collect the tax.
You
Okay,
can't take tax that they're not authorized to
Yeah.
take.
okay. They authorize the collection.
Been working with these guys a long time.
That transfers from the sewer maintenance district to our district.
Correct.
You know, as part of that meeting too, Felicia, I think LAFCO agrees with this. We just did our Prop 218 study. It was good for 5 years, and we didn't include Murray Park.
Right.
So they continue their
For the next 5
service charge
years,
for
yeah.
5 years. And we talked to the people at the public hearing about that.
Yeah.
But we're made whole because they've got the reserve funds.
That's right, the $300,000.
Yeah.
Well, I think that in 5 years, I can pack it. In 5 years, they'll
Good.
be unhappy.
And we better start warning them a couple of
That's
years
right,
ahead.
yeah.
Wait, so when do
Sorry,
the
Larry was
rates,
unhappy, we got it.
when do their rates go up?
Not for 5 years.
You're kidding.
No, we already did our rate study, it's
But
done.
will we be responsible for repairs and
Yeah, but they have a
upgrades and risks?
$300,000 balance we're getting turned over to us.
And
Sorry?
We're getting a $300,000 balance they have turned over to us.
Okay, is that enough?
Yeah, it's only 89 homes.
It's just right now.
Yeah,
There's 89 homes, and 2 of them are duplexes, 87 are single.
And
Covers the difference.
Yes,
collect
they
property
need,
taxes,
they
too.
need a lot of education.
it's
gonna
a
go
very
for the
fortunate,
Property
a
tax.
very fortunate circumstance in this case where they have $300,000 in reserves, and if you do the math, the differential between their sewer rates and the income revenue we'll receive and what other Ross Valley rates are is almost equivalent to the reserve amount for 5 years. It's very close, very fortunate circumstance. So it's made the discussions fairly smooth with the county and during the public meeting, because for that period of time, we don't have to go out and do another Prop 218 process. Now, when the next 5 years comes around, yes, there will be an adjustment, but we also have there's a couple system issues. We're already doing all the operation and maintenance on their system, so they've been getting a good deal since 1993.
93, and before that with Larkspur.
Yeah, and so they've received a great value, and now their system gets embedded into our capital system and our info asset information system, and we'll do risk-based work in their system on the same level as the rest of the system. And I've seen a preview of some of our upcoming work, and it's near Murray Park, so there'll be capital work in the next 3 or 4 years that helps their area. But we also did the Magnolia Sewer in 2014, which directly benefits the Murray Park area as far as conveying trunk lines over here to the pump station 14 Larkspur. So they already are getting value from Ross Valley Sanitary District that they did not pay into through that 2014 project. So all those system issues really point to us taking it over, and we're in a fortunate circumstance that the funding is available, so it won't be a shock to the system or the citizens of that area.
Okay, but right now they're what, 400?
$472.
And they'll go in 5 years to 1,200.
In 5 years, yeah, whatever the Ross Valley
Yeah,
rate will
it'll
be
be
in 5
It'll be
years.
identical to what the Ross
So
Valley.
they should start saving their pennies now.
They are, they're saving.
It's adjacent to Kemwood, you know? It's not, and a big house was just built up there. It is not, I would say it's not a low income portion of it.
Right.
But they'll get everything exactly what Ross Valley, everything
Yes.
transfers.
And I think the other thing of interest to the property owners there is that they will also then be eligible for our grant and loan program, which they're not currently eligible for because they're outside of our district.
Okay. So they've all been noticed? They've been noticed?
Yes.
And how many people showed up?
At the meeting in June that we had here, I want to say there was 6 or 7 of them that were here, which when you're talking about 90 parcels,
Yeah, that's actually a lot.
that's like 5% of your population is showing up.
Yeah.
So, and outside of that, I also had talked with, prior to that meeting, based on some connections from Supervisor Rice's office, I had talked with about 5 other people who had not even shown up to our June meeting prior to that, to talk to them, who were like kind of the leaders in the group, and they were, one of them had some questions, but the rest of them were like, yeah, no, we wanted to do this years ago. And so I can honestly say, like, we talked to at least over 10% of the population. Try talking to 10% of the population on something of this matter, and you're in good
Yeah,
shape.
this has been going on since I've been here.
Yeah.
9 years now. All right.
Well, if this goes well,
Excellent.
then San Quentin's next.
Oh, yeah.
That always start in January, I think.
We were just talking about that.
Okay, San Quentin Village. And how many homes are there?
About half as many
Yeah.
as in Marin Park.
Half?
Yeah.
45, 47, something
Something
like that?
there. I think 47 is the right number. but
It's,
I don't have exact
that one has a
numbers.
huge condo thing, so you have, depends on how you determine.
Right.
Here, it's all single-family homes for the most part. There, it's a huge condo complex and then some single-family homes next to it. So a slightly different setup.
I think this is a great thing that we've been working towards for a very long time. Are there any more comments from the board at this time? So, seeing none, I hereby close the public hearing.
Did you get public comment?
I asked if there's any public, and seeing none, I mean, oh, is it public?
Right.
That's right, I just feared. You're a member of the board. Okay, seeing none. Okay, I now hereby close the public hearing. So there's nothing else to do on this one?
Do we have
No,
Well,
it's-
discuss it.
do we have to come back? You know, like a lot of towns will do a second reading. We're done after tonight?
You're done, it'll be published in the, oh no, not this one won't be published, that's the next one. No, you're done after this.
Okay.
So we're.
Did we enact the resolution?
Yeah.
No, we're
There
saying
was
to
still
move
a-
forward with it.
No, it's a public hearing's open, so.
So that's closed.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
So.
It comes back next month.
No, you're not done. No,
Okay.
you still need
He was about to go on to the next
to, you
agenda.
still need to consider adoption of the resolution. All this closed with the public hearing portion.
Okay,
Thank you.
so, are there any more board comments?
I'd only point out that, as Steve has mentioned, Ross Valley Sanitary has been doing all the work since 1993. Prior to 1993, Larkspur was doing all the work. The county's really not been involved in conveying the flow. So I think this makes complete sense. It's a weird overlying group of, 89 homes, and it should have happened some time ago. I'm glad we're getting it done. I point out that we're moving towards consolidation as we promised we would, and in response to grand jury requests that we do, and we'll continue to work for consolidation and shared services wherever we can. So I'd be ready to make a motion.
Any other board comments? Okay, Doug.
I would ask that we adopt resolution number 19-1566, requesting the local agency formation commission, LAFCO, to initiate proceedings for reorganization of territory of the Murray Park Sewer Maintenance District in accordance with the Cortese-Knox-Pittsburgh Act. And they had to have, that's one time they don't say the CTX Act, you know?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, unanimous.
I'm big pardon,
Oh,
President
sorry.
Epstein. There's a point of information here that we'd also like the board to act on the revenue fund balance transfer document.
In the recommendation at the end of the staff report, there's actually two things. There's approving the resolution and there's ratifying execution of this
Ah, yes.
agreement for the fund
Okay,
balance
would
transfer.
anybody like to make
Follow up.
the,
Taking
should
money
we do it over again?
But I don't see where it
Right
is.
here, ratify it.
What page?
The recommendation.
At the end of the staff report recommendation. Right here, the last
Yeah.
half a sentence.
That's how you get your 300,000.
I move we ratify the execution of the Murray Park Sewer Maintenance District Agreement for revenue fund balance transfer to Ross Valley Sanitary District.
Okay, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's not a
Any
roll
opposed?
call?
No. Do we need a roll call for this?
No.
Motion carries.
Is the county gonna get any of the property tax that currently goes to our county?
That's what the agreements you just approved say.
Except it talks in there about adjustments,
Yeah, as they're closing out books for things that they currently have to pay off, they're allowed to pay off those things before the money transfers.
all right.
Which is probably gonna be like 289,000.
No.
It'll be $350 to pay off the state board of equalization, the application, and some staff time.
And I'm sure there's a LAFCO thing.
No, we're actually waiving our fee for this.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Shows up at our hearing and he waives the fees. You're in favor of the
Sandwich.
relationship.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, how long have you been on LAFCO? It's your recent, right? 'Cause
Yeah,
this is-
I
this is
started
great.
as a consultant for them last June, and started as full-time staff as the executive officer in January.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so you probably be the only one in the long term that's actually done a consolidation. Or maybe some of the fire districts.
Okay, next. Item number
Thank you.
9.
Thank you.
Nice on you.
Thank you. Item number 9, conduct a public hearing and consider acceptance of the Ross Valley Sanitary District 2019 capacity charge and permit fee study and adoption of ordinance number 91. An ordinance repealing ordinance 90 adopted February 21st, 2018, and enacting this ordinance relating to sewer capacity charges and sewer permit fees. Steve? Now give a brief, and then
And very
Mark.
brief, once again. So we're looking at a couple items here. One is accepting the study, which has two items, which is the capacity charge changes to what used to be called connection fees, or currently called, number one. Number two, adopting revised permit fees. So there's a capacity charge and a permit fee. And we have Mark Hildebrand of Hildebrand Consulting who conducted the study to give a PowerPoint presentation. And I'll just note a couple of innovations here I want to make note of is with Mark's help, we have made the capacity charge fees based on an actual evaluation of our assets. As opposed to 5 years ago, there was a modeled, assumed asset value. This was actually based on, the fees derived from the value of our assets, number one. Number two, the permit fees are based on evaluation of staff time and resources to issue the permits. So instead of just an estimated number without a lot of basis, say $250, now for lateral fees, we actually looked at staff time and came up with $217. It's more anchored in the reality of the resources required to do the transaction. So just wanted to highlight those innovations in this overall proposal and hand it over to Mark to give an overview of the capacity charge and permit fee study.
Good. Thank you. Happy to be back. Thank you for having me.
We like you.
Okay, so as Steve pointed out, we'll be talking about two different fees and charges here, your capacity charges and your connection permit fees. So this will be new terminology for you. We're proposing to change your current nomenclature to call these connection fees. We're proposing capacity charges. And these are one-time fees paid by development to join your system. The basic idea is that they're essentially buying into the values of the assets that they're joined into. They're going to take up a certain amount of capacity in the pipes, in the pump stations and everything that's already there. Their future rates will pay for the maintenance of all those assets, but they need to pay these charges in order to join the system in the first place. The reason that we are proposing the new nomenclature is twofold. One is that, well, threefold probably. One is that the applicable law, which is Government Code Section 66,000, uses the term capacity charge, and so I personally just find it clear. There's tons of terms that get used for this particular fee for some reason. There's development impact fees, there's capacity charges, there's capital facility charges. You got to probably list 15 different terms that the industry uses, but this is the term that the state law uses, so that makes it clear. It's also the term that that CMSA uses, which helps clarify that it's for the same purpose. They do theirs for the treatment, you do yours for the collection system. And then the last reason is that connection fee specifically is more often associated with the actual plumbing charge, the cost of putting in the connection pipes. So those were the reasons we're proposing to change it. In terms of calculating the capacity charge, there's two general methodologies that are used in the industry. One is the buy-in approach, and the other one is called the incremental cost approach. So the buy-in approach is basically in a situation where you have plenty of capacity for new customers to join, you look at the value of your existing assets. And the value of your existing assets comes down to the replacement cost of all those assets, but then you subtract the depreciation. Because you're recognizing the fact that they're buying a used car, essentially. They're buying assets that they're going to have to now pay rates to maintain, and so the older the system, the less valuable it is for them to join that system. So you want to make sure you capture the depreciation of the assets that they're joining in that particular approach. The incremental cost approach is used when you're really at capacity and you're going to need to build new capacity to support development, to be able to accommodate new customers, and that's just based on what you project your future costs are going to be for adding X amount of capacity to the system. So obviously the buy-in approach is cheaper because they're essentially the same number except for one accounts for depreciation. The buy-in approach is what we're proposing here because you are in a situation where you do have plenty of capacity in your system to serve new customers. You don't have any plans in your capital program to expand your system. So we are proposing the buy-in approach. And this are 3 bullets that summarize what I just said, so I won't repeat them. Here's the valuation that we came up with. So as Steve pointed out, the last study did not have access to a comprehensive asset register, which is basically a list of all your assets when they were put in the ground, what it costs originally, and so you have the date of the asset. And since that time, you concluded your IAMP project, which was an asset management project, which developed a pretty robust asset register. So rather than repeat what they did 5 years ago, which was estimate how many pipes are out there, how many miles of pipe are out there, and how many pump stations, and trying to calculate what they think the system might be worth, we actually took the actual asset register, looked at the original costs of the assets, looked at how old they were. We escalated the cost of the original cost to today's value to estimate what it would cost to replace that asset today. And then based on the age of that asset, we were able to depreciate it to, as I mentioned earlier. So we have all these categories, building, land, sewer lines. So here's a list of the original costs based on your asset register. The book value would be the original cost less depreciation. The RCN, which is the replacement cost new, is taking the original cost, escalating it to today's value based on the CCI, the construction cost index, And the RCNLD, which is the operative value that we use for the study, is taking the RCN and subtracting depreciation. So those are your four numbers that we looked at, but ultimately these are the numbers that the current capacity charges are being proposed to be based on. The one line that is not in your formal asset register is pipe predating 1972. So when looking at your register, we recognized, and thank you, Tom, for noticing this, but there was a whole group of assets that were missing. Pre-1972 pipes did not make it into the register for one reason or another. Now we know how many miles of pipe we have because of your GIS system. We know how many miles of pipe we have. We just don't have specific data on when they were installed and whatnot. So we were able to take the number of miles and come up with some assumptions on how large those pipes were and be able to calculate what we assume to be the replacement cost of those pre-1972 pipes. And then we just assume that they're all put in 1972 to come up with a depreciation value for those. So we were able to fill in a pretty big hole in your asset register to be able to come up with a more equitable number in our calculations.
One thing I'd like to clarify, that was excellent, Mark, thank you. But also just remind the board that this is a point in time where we have good information that's comprehensive. And that, and you selected June 2018.
Right.
And you can explain that.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason that date's important is because of this next step. So we take that number that was on the previous slide, the RCNLD of all assets, and then as of June 30th, 2019, and I'll explain the significance of the date in a second, you want to subtract your debt principal. So you think about it this way, if somebody's joining a system that has no debt, and their rates that they're going to pay won't have any debt in the rates that they're paying in the rate charges, it's worth a lot more to them than if they enter into a system that has a ton of debt. So you want to take that debt and subtract it from the value of the system as a whole, because they're going to be paying for that debt later. You want to double charge them essentially for that debt. On the other hand, joining a system that's broke, that has no money in the bank, is also less valuable than joining one that has $100 million in the bank. So you want to add the cash that they have, the reserves, you want to add that to the value of the system. So as of June 30th, 2018, we have a very strong record of what your outstanding debt was at the time and what your outstanding or your reserves were at the time. Since that time, there's been a lot of construction in progress, there's been debt that's been issued, and so it wasn't very, we felt like the number in 2000, the end of last fiscal year, was probably the best number to use because we just had solid data for that particular date. So that gives us, we subtract the debt, we add the reserves, and we come up with a total system valuation of $138 million. From this, we simply divide this number by the total number of EDUs in the system currently, plus we add a few extra EDUs based on how many more EDUs we expect to join the system over the next 10 years. So we looked at a study that looked at growth. It was a ABAG study on growth projections for the county, and so we made some calculations to estimate how many more EDUs we expect to join the system over the next 10 years. We added that to your current base of EDUs, and we simply divided this number by your total number of EDUs, and that gives us our proposed capacity charge for one EDU. That's the methodology. Your existing fee is $5,076, and we're proposing $5,987, so an increase of about $900.
And that's about less than 20%.
And when was the last time you did this?
Last time was in 2015.
What were the numbers of proposed additional EDUs based on the ABAG report? The ABAG numbers are not typically very accurate.
It's true.
Yeah, frankly, it's not that many. Well, you currently have 21,500, and the numbers that I took from ABAG estimated that you're going to get another 1,600 EDUs. So So, if that number went up by 500 or down by 500, it wouldn't affect the math too much, I don't
Okay.
think. So in terms of the structure, we're going to keep the same structure that you currently have, so I'll just summarize it here. For new connections, you charge a minimum 1 EDU, so whether it's a single-family home or commercial, whatnot, they pay at least 1 EDU. And then you count how many fixtures they're putting in. They get up to 23 fixtures in that structure. If they have over 23 fixtures, then they're going to pay $260 per fixture. And 260 is simply the 5,900 divided by 23 gives you 260. So if they have 24 fixtures, they'll pay the 5,900 plus $260, etc. For remodels, for each additional fixture that gets added to over the course of a remodel, they'll pay $260 for that additional fixture.
I have a question. Did you review also for new EDUs for affordable housing?
We will talk about that as
You
well.
will?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm not sure if it's in the PowerPoint, but I'll bring it up before we finish.
Okay.
It's in the ordinance that we're proposing to adopt. In that. And then there's ADUs. So ADUs, accessory dwelling units, are a subject of a lot of interest from the state recently. They're passing a series of laws over the last 5 to 8 years, trying to encourage ADUs to be adopted in communities just to provide more housing in California because of the housing crisis. And so one of the things that the state law prohibits is charging capacity charges in certain instances that ADUs get built. So while the law doesn't use the specific terminology, when you read the law, you can kind of surmise that there's 4 different types of ADUs. One is when you build the ADU within an existing structure, so within a single-family home or even an outside structure, and you don't need a new sewer connection, you don't need a new meter. In that case, you are not allowed to charge a capacity charge. If you expand an existing structure, then you can charge a capacity charge. However, they just changed the law last week. They just signed, it's going to change on January 1st, but it got signed into the law, and thank you, Andrea, for finding this, that if you expand it by less than 120 feet, so if you take a single family home and you only add 120 feet, then you still can't charge a capacity charge. So your ordinance will reflect that. It didn't reflect that in, sorry.
Hang on, it now does. We have a change sheet. We worked on it today.
Okay, great.
And it's 150 feet. So
It's
we
150.
modified the definitions of 1, 2, and 3 to make abundantly clear that it is now consistent with the new law, which takes effect January 1.
Okay, 150, thank you.
So when you make a motion, you should choose to do so, please also include change sheet number 1.
Type 3 is anytime you convert an accessory, well, I kind of lumped that into like type 1 earlier, but if you convert a garage or something into an ADU and it doesn't require an additional sewer lateral, then you cannot charge a capacity charge. But if you build a brand new structure, then you can. So here's a survey of agencies around the area. This is the same agencies that were surveyed during the last study. And so you can see here are your current rates. Here's what CMSA charges. So you charge a total, well, new customers are charged a total of $11,300. We're proposing to increase that by the $900, so your total is $12,200. And you can see how other districts charge around. You'd be second to TCSD at $14,500. Although I just came from a meeting with North Marin, and they charge $28,000. So there's always that, but there are moderations.
The MMWD is pretty high too, over 20,000.
Is what?
Over 20.
Okay. So that's it for capacity charges. The question about affordable housing, there is a section in the existing ordinance that addresses that, and we did make some proposed changes to that. I believe that the language, and we were just talking about this yesterday, I believe that the language that we ended up with was that it will be the board, well, actually, how did we end up changing it?
We didn't change it, actually.
We did. The existing ordinance 90 says that the board for, not for below market housing can approve any level of a discount up to 100% discount. And so we heard the board that you didn't want to have that much latitude based on the Victory Village example, which
So is that in
predates
here?
me.
Yes,
So what
that's
we
right.
proposed, in hearing what the board's concerns were, we proposed that in section 26, section 26, if you go into the packet, that's on page
Page 8, section 22.
Page 8
8.
of the ordinance.
And so this sets a cap. It says, on adoption of resolution by the board, the district may approve a reduction of up to 50% of capacity charges.
We got rid of that 90.
Where
And
is
that's
it?
what we talked about, yes, so I remember that.
Page 8,
26,
section
the
26. Capacity charge
Page
waiver. Yeah, capacity charge waiver.
eight, Section 26.
Is here. Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't have it.
So before it said the board could waive it entirely or something, 0 to 100% basically.
Everything's-
And so what we heard and are recommending is to make it so you can approve a reduction up to 50%. We reviewed what other agencies are doing on this. And most of the sanitary districts in Marin County do not have this provision. Marin Municipal Water District has this provision to waive up to 50%. So what we
That's where that came from too, yeah.
what we have in here mirrors what Marin Municipal Water District adopted. And so, Felicia, you could correct, or if you remember any of the other agencies.
What about CMSA?
Policy, could you help?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember?
I'm afraid I don't.
I don't.
There were two other agencies that had somewhat similar waivers. I think actually it was Tamalpais Community Service District had a waiver of up to 100%, but we used to have. And then MMWD had 50%, and it was either Las Colinas or Novato San that had a 50% waiver. And then no other districts that we surveyed had any waiver.
Tom reminds me that CMSA matches ours.
Well, they get what we collect.
Yeah, we give them.
Whatever we collect, they get half of. So we get to decide, right?
If ours is half, they get half of theirs.
Yeah.
Is that what we gave the housing folks
No,
in
we gave them
Fairfax?
80%.
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
and then we agreed at the end that that wasn't so nice moving forward.
Right, but we'd done that previously, so they had relied
Right,
on that.
that's correct.
Okay, all right, well, now
So
it's
how many
explicit.
agencies are you?
Now it's in the ordinance. Read the ordinance.
A few?
How many agencies did
Yeah.
we survey? A dozen.
A dozen?
Yes.
Okay. And Marin only?
Not only in Marin, in the Bay Area. Yeah,
How
so
many
you
did you
did
survey in Marin? I'm just curious.
probably all of them. Yeah,
Oh, I see. Okay, so you found 3 or 4 that come back to a lower amount,
that, I'm sorry,
that came back to a lower amount,
that had a higher waiver.
50%.
Yeah, most of them were, there were 2 that had a 50% waiver and 1 that had also had a 100% waiver. Might be something else.
And the others had no waiver,
And the others had
written in
no
the
waiver.
ordinance.
So the majority didn't have any waiver for the below market housing.
So if we go at 50% and we get an agency in here, and it's like a Victory Village, can we move that? Can we say we want more, Andrea? Is that possible? Can we put the wording in there just in case? Because I hate to, what I'm going at is this affordable housing thing's really heated up. And if we get, really, like, they worked years to get that through. And sometimes these kind of agency costs will break them.
Yeah, and then
They'll totally be broken.
they sold about 4 acres for high-income housing after we gave them the 80% waiver.
I know, it's a mess, it's a total mess. Because that land in the beginning was given as open space.
Right.
And then they claim Well, what happened is probably costs went up, blah, blah, blah. It's a contractor's trip, as we know. So I'm just wondering, is there a way we can wiggle beyond the 50%?
If, on this language, no. You would want to put in language here that says up to 100% if you think you want to go for 100%. You would need to change this ordinance if in the future you wanted to do more than 50%. You're restricting yourself here
Yeah, a lot of.
on purpose.
Yes, and I'm okay with that.
You don't want affordable housing?
It's not that I don't want affordable housing, it's that I don't believe that anybody who builds housing is not making money. They're putting some affordable housing in on places that have, not affordable housing.
And the affordable cost, if we talked about this, should it be nonprofits only?
That's a very good idea. If it says that, then I might, but they don't make any money for affordable housing when they build it, they don't. And so we're trying to help get affordable housing out there. I'm just saying, we need workforce for our guys to live here in the agency, police, fire, teachers. Even at the hospital right now, a lot of people are quitting because they cannot live close to their jobs. So I'm kind of become this little advocate lately of how can we help? I'm not going to support 50%. That's why I'm trying to figure out, is there a way, if you guys want to stay with it, fine. But I'm trying to promote some affordable housing.
Director Maris, if I may provide some additional information to you that could be helpful. I recall during the Victory Village deliberations, and they came to the board twice, that one of the things that they said to the board was, oh gee, if we had known it was 50%, we would have budgeted for 50%. And so I think that by adopting this ordinance, what you're doing is a service to those affordable housing developers, whereby they can now count on this number, whereas before you didn't have a number they could
Okay,
count on.
I beg to differ. We're a big agency, and the whole Ross Valley, we've got a lot of area to cover. This affordable housing is really going to be jammed. I can't go into, but I was a planning commissioner for 9 years. I understand how affordable housing works. It's built, and they don't make a lot of money on it, so you want to help them in the process. So I get it, the board, most of you don't want to give that extra money up, but
Who do you want to help?
I want to help people who can have their jobs so they can live here.
Okay, but what happens on?
Talk louder.
I mean, if we,
Hang on.
Thanks, Michael.
Hang on.
oh, you have a question?
No,
Oh,
it's hard to hear.
I don't understand
What
fingers.
happens on affordable housing if it's a for-profit contractor? The city or the jurisdictional agency requires a certain amount of affordable houses on there. And the contractor decides, is he going to make money or not on the full project? And it's just like having an environmental requirement that he's got to plant trees or something like that. The developer looks at the costs and he goes, I don't make any money, or maybe I lose a little bit of money on the affordable housing units, but I make a lot of money over here. So basically, the savings go to the developer.
Okay.
Now, if we talked about a nonprofit, which we were discussing in the finance committee, the argument is probably okay. But it isn't on all private developments. And we did want to put a limit in here because we get stuck in the position of
Everybody's going to assume 100%.
that and two.
We cook the books at 100%.
Hang on, Doug.
And we're gonna have a debate on the project, the village project or this other project, and it's something we shouldn't be doing.
So are you willing, if it's a nonprofit, are you willing to give more money?
I am a lot more than these, but I think 50% is a good amount. And I thought I argued against 80% at the village project, but they had counted on it.
I argued the other side.
And we started tight.
I think we all voted for it, but I'm not sure.
I think certainty is the most important.
Yeah, I do too.
And I also don't think that even a nonprofit housing project is going to be made or broken by these. And it's interesting to hear Fairfax has had such a brouhaha about affordable housing over the past year or two.
That's right.
With
That's
Frank
why
Edgar on the,
Well, I don't love Frank all the time, like a lot of people think, okay? So I don't get that clear on the record.
okay. But
My
I,
own children had to move out of Fairfax, right? So this is a sore subject for me, but go ahead.
so I think certainty is the most important thing. I don't know if 50% is the magic number. This says up to 50%. I mean, if we say up to 50%, people are gonna think it's 50%, right?
Yeah.
So if we were to say up to 80% or up to 100, they're gonna think that, yeah.
Yep.
Um,
And they're
so,
gonna have their budget in there, and then they'll come to us at the end and say, we already did this, and now it's too late.
yeah, I think up to 50% is probably.
I don't know.
It's also consistent with other agencies like Marin Municipal Water District.
With most of them.
And it's still.
In fact, look at us, we're one of the few that is giving anything. One of 4 out of, whatever it is, 12 or something, we're giving 50%.
There are considerations, the development happens, it's a nonprofit organization, they sell to a for-profit organization. Under section 16, the capacity charge paid for the original development runs with the parcel. So then you're given the benefit to, to one entity, but then the future entity benefit, indirectly.
So can you add a sentence, Andrea, that says that if any transaction, property transaction happens that sells this project to somebody who doesn't qualify for this clause, that they'll be charged for the difference?
We could, but we'd have to track every sale.
Yeah, that may be more complicated.
Yeah, no, it's a
I
good
feel like the
question.
future encumbrance would be
And
problematic.
it's hard to track, as I say, I appreciate the thought, but I just bring it up that from a system integrity, fairness, in terms of actually those principles that Mark described about the reason for capacity charges, you're benefiting from this investment of all the other ratepayers or those who have bought capacity in the past. So you're doing your share to buy in. I caution against giving a free ride in the name of equity, and given that these amounts are not at a level that make or break the project that they've budgeted for. So, in terms of the integrity of the process and the system, going to 100%, to me, I'm not sure I'd recommend
Have we derailed your presentation?
No, I paused on purpose because I thought we'd get through that conversation. And now, do you want to do the motion now for capacity charges, or do you want me to finish with the connection fees, or the
Should we
permit
do
fees?
Yes, good whole
The whole thing? Okay. So moving on to permit fees, you currently have a series of permit fees. We've renamed some of them and reclassified a few. Ultimately, all of these permit fees are based on staff time. So we looked at fully burdened hourly rates based on salaries, benefits, and whatnot. Those numbers are readily available from the finance department. And so we simply had to find out how much time staff spends between going out in the field, inspecting, paperwork, etc. The only non-labor costs that are in there is that there is a technology fee of 30%, which is intended to help defray some of the costs of a tracking system that you intend on purchasing to be able to track some of these permits and your developers and whatnot. And in vehicle use, we also looked at the amount of time vehicle spends during the inspections. So for new connections, currently the permit fee is $550. We're proposing $594. These two categories are new. Previously, they were classified differently, but we decided to go with what I believe is a county measure, the over $75,000. I remember those
It's
numbers.
based on our.
You have a
based on
previously
our
existing definition of major projects.
Yeah.
So because that was already in place, we decided to go with that. So anything over $75,000 tends to have X number of inspections and whatnot. So we were able to make some assumptions about how much time that would take versus minor projects, which has fewer inspections and is a more efficient process. So that's a different fee. Lateral work, same idea. Public shore extension projects are pretty elaborate. Additional inspections, discharge or pool drain is a process that requires some paperwork and also inspections. And then there are some instances where there's special projects that don't necessarily fall under any of these categories that you'll simply have to charge time and materials, and your hourly rates are published in the ordinance. The only fee that doesn't really fit under this category is the service resumption fee. So this is for accounts that stop paying their sewer service charge for an extended amount of time, at least 12 months. So whether it's because the building burned down and they take some while to rebuild, or simply because the property goes vacant and they just stop paying their water bill and their sewer bill, if and when they rejoin the system, this fee is intended to recoup the part of the sewer service charge that was maintaining the collection system in front of their home and all the way to the treatment plant, because they benefited from however much time they weren't connected, there was maintenance being done to that system, keeping it in good shape so that when they joined back in, the system was in good shape. So I went back and looked at the cost of service study that was recently conducted. I did some math and came to the conclusion that about 60% of your sewer service charge is currently for capital and maintenance and labor and that type. So I'm proposing that that those customers who want to rejoin, that they pay 50% of whatever sewer service charges they missed over the period that they were not connected. So it'd be after at least 12 months of non-payment, and it would be, to keep it administratively simple, it would be 1 year increments. So they either pay a full 12 months or a full 24 months or a full 36 months. It'd be 1 year increments. So.
What if the house burns down? What if there's a disaster? Would you put that in there so they have to pay those fees?
Yeah.
Because they still get the benefit of the system in front of their house being maintained.
And then you have here special projects, it just says time and materials.
Yeah.
What are you basing the time on?
So this I believe already happens, and staff, for projects that don't fit under any of these categories,
Yeah.
they just need to be able to track their time, and then they build the project. So those projects are pretty rare, I believe, and I think that developers, the conversation that staff has with the developer in that case is pretty intimate. I think there's a pretty good communication that happens between them, and so there's no surprises.
But we don't have any boundaries or limits on what we're going to pay, and there's
What kind of projects are
there's
we
nothing
talking
here,
about
it just
for-
says time and
The
materials.
College of Marin has a project that we would probably not have been able to categorize it into either a major or minor project. Marin Catholic was shaping up to have a project that would probably fall under special projects. Marin General Hospital would be another large
So you would
project.
charge them on an hourly basis?
Yes.
What would that be?
Well,
not in
plan check services, I think, are typically $110 an
We've
hour.
got a list of them in the
There is a
report.
list of them. isn't there?
Yeah, actually, it's on page, well, it's at the end of, it's Exhibit A, which is after page 8.
Yes,
And it's page 3 of Exhibit A. There are no page numbers. And their actual hourly rate,
Yeah, for special projects.
we actually call those,
Hourly rates for different classifications.
I would ask that you reference that to this page, and then I don't have to drag out the meeting.
Okay, so that's conclusion of my presentation. Next steps is to vote for the capacity charges and for the permit fees. I believe it would be a separate measure to adopt ordinance 91. It's just a single,
one ordinance.
one ordinance, right? Okay. And then, once adopted, staff would publish these charges and fees in the local paper, and we're proposing that they be implemented on December 1st, simply because it's a Monday.
and also there's a change sheet with that new ADU law that Andrea and Julia helped with, actually, too. And I hazard a guess, we might be the first agency that they're going to do ordinance, but I don't want to promise.
It isn't effective.
Now, we are making this effective December 1st. The new law does not take effect until January 1st. And so we are going to, the ordinance is going to, for 1 month, it's going to
Preempt.
preempt so we don't have to bring it back before the board and go through this again.
Right.
Those changes are gonna be made to represent, as of December 1st, what's happening on January 1st. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well done, and it was your idea, to your credit, President.
I knew it sounded like a Michael idea. So do we project how many new connections we think we're going to have in a year and how much money we're going to bring in? Is this going to have any budgetary impact, or is it all?
A pretty minor one,
Foreseen.
yeah. I mean, we don't, as you know, we talked about a little earlier, we don't have that much development in the county, right? And so new connections are fairly rare. I think, Mark, you did as part of your sewer rate study an estimate of how many we.
Yeah, I did look at historical revenue that you got from there,
Yeah.
and I believe that had you growing at about 1%.
Oh, you have it there? Yeah.
These numbers assume that you're going to, over the next 10 years, that you're gonna have about 160 EDUs per year. That seems like a lot.
I have the 1920 budget right here, and in our Schedule 2 for funding sources, we have connections, and we budget $260,000 as revenue for connections.
So at the current rate of $5,000, that would be 500 new connections. 50.
We talked about this in the finance committee.
Yeah.
50 a year.
It's probably using ABAG, it's high.
Maybe
It was high, yeah, but, you know, when developers come in and argue about the connection fee, and say, well, we used a liberal number here, and I calculated the impact on it, it's something like $400 on the charge. Went way down to like 45 a year, or something.
No, got it, no.
Is it back to the room?
Yeah, we're done with the.
Did you close the public
He
hearing?
didn't
Did you ask
open
for
the public
a
hearing.
comment?
Didn't I open the public hearing? No, we do that now.
Are you done?
Yeah, we opened it. Yeah.
I think you should open it just in case. I don't think you did.
I'm pretty sure I read Michael, item number 9. I will now
So
open
can
the,
I, wait, I want one general question here. So the reason we're doing this is, because we just did it 5 years ago, right? Where, before, we didn't do it like for 20 plus years.
I would suggest it's best practice to do it approximately every 5
Every
years.
5
But I'd
years.
also say that we've changed the way we're doing the methodology because now we've done evaluation of
Right.
the equipment that's in the ground. So
Let me-
that's
let
totally
me
different from
on the
5 years.
outside chance I didn't open this, and I thought I did, let me open. Item number 9, conduct public hearing and consider acceptance of the Ross Valley Sanitary District 2019 capacity charge and permit fee study and adoption of ordinance number 91 and ordinance repealing ordinance 90 and adopted February 21st, 2018, and enacting this ordinance relating to sewer capacity charges and sewer permit fees. I will now open the public hearing on this item. Mark, did we hear your presentation? Okay. Let me start over. Steve gave us the background. It was lovely. Any members of the public interested in making a comment at this time?
I have a question. This is sort of a technical. How did you calculate the depreciation? Was it a percentage or was it an amount? And did it apply to both columns equally?
Yeah, so second question, yes. First question is straight line depreciation based on the estimated useful life of different asset classes. So pipes were assigned 50 years, so depending on the classification of the asset, we made some expected useful life assumptions. So if it's 25 years old.
Our assets are done by our accounting staff, and they depreciate it every year. We calculate depreciation every
So you
year.
did that, well, as I know that it looked to me like you was doing some adjustments to the numbers, and so I was
The
wondering.
adjustments were that we have money in the bank and we have unspent bond money.
So this is the,
I think when we did part of this, we also looked at it as, just because it's depreciated to zero over a certain number of years, it's still in the ground, it's still moving effluent down the system, so it has a value that before I don't think we were counting. Isn't that what happened?
Yes.
Yes,
And that's
So-
pre-1972.
that's right. It has a value, even though we've now given it a value.
It's probably been
I think
100% depreciated, but it's still in the ground and useful,
And market, yeah.
so it's valuable.
Um,
Didn't you get the numbers from our fixed asset list
yes.
and the depreciation from our fixed asset?
The depreciation assumptions I took from your financial practices, as you point out for your CAFR, which this comes straight from your financial statements. The book value is listed, so it's based on your original cost and it's depreciating it. So I use that same depreciation schedule for this particular column. The only number that was, as you might mention, manipulated or whatnot, would be simply if a pipe were put in the ground 20 years ago for $200,000, I escalated that $200,000 for 20 years to get what I think that pipe would cost today. And so that's what went into this number here. And then I depreciated it by the 20 years to get to the next level. And actually, for things that are fully depreciated are shown as 0 here.
Okay.
So we could have had a higher number if I had, and I have done that in the past where I say nothing's worth 0, it's still serviceable, so we're going to put a floor of 15%. Nothing is worth less than 15% of its replacement cost because it's still serviceable, still uses. So, and that would have increased your charge by quite a bit. So there are some assets that are in here that are 0, so we're not charging as much
I
as we
saw
could
the
have.
0 fixed assets and the
Right.
fixed assets.
Well, why wouldn't you do that for this? You know what?
It's reasonable. There's, if you look at the existing charge is $5,000, we're proposing a $900 increase
Already.
already. I don't think, we don't want to hurt the development community and charge $6,000 or $7,000. There's a lot more latitude that goes into charging capacity charges. You don't have to charge them at all, if you don't want to. It's not like a sewer rate where there's a lot stricter framework. You can charge 0 or you can charge up to what's reasonable, and so we felt like this was a reasonable number.
Just so you know, for many years, it was like $400 or something. And then Frank came in and stirred the pot. And that's why this all happened. And then they did a big development right across the street here, and we got in before that development. Anyway, thank
So
you.
you all are happy not putting in the
Floor
floor
of 15%,
15%?
yeah.
I think the charge is a reasonable number. The total wastewater bill now, counting CMSA, is like $12,000 for connection fees. Pam was worried about affordable housing, and yeah, that's one of the elements of it. And we did have latitude. That was one of the points in the finance committee. We saw a draft of this and we reacted to just look at the value of the facility. I kind of really like the way this is more clear than the previous one. I reread the previous study and it was pretty hard to follow. This one's very simple to follow. And what's really interesting is we do have an escalator on it to keep it current with the engineering news record. We had that before. But we've also got escalators on the fees. So they will be adjusted a few bucks each year instead of just leaving it for 30 or 40 years. And then in 5 years, we probably should do this again.
What's the escalator amount?
It's the CCI.
San Francisco Engineering Construction Cost Index for both of them.
Okay, so they put out
There's
about
a
every
number
year,
they put out, yeah.
Yeah, they publish it.
Every
Usually
month
around
they
2.5%.
publish it.
2.5.
And we just compare the change over 12 years.
Okay, it's better than what we did before.
Any other members of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for one last consideration here. And having none, do I hear a motion? Do I close first?
Close the public hearing.
Okay, I close the public hearing. I'm gonna get it right this time. I now hereby close the public hearing, bang gavel. One more.
I move to accept the Ross Valley Sanitary District 2019 sewer capacity charge and permit fee study and adoption of ordinance number 91 and ordinance repealing ordinance number 90, adopted February 21st, 2018, and enacting this ordinance relating to sewer capacity charges and sewer permit fees, along with change sheet number 1, item 9.
I'll second.
Do we need a roll call or? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I would like to say that, Mark, is it Mark?
Yeah.
Mark, you did an excellent job for me, because I don't do well as good as Tom with numbers and other people. And reviewing the mistakes we've made in the past, this is an improvement, it's clear, it's telling us where we're at, where we're going. I'm not 100% happy about the 50% for the affordable housing, but I think reviewing the whole picture, I can give it up and I will support it, so I'm voting yes.
Okay, so I think we were all in favor, there were no
Aye.
opposition, so. There we go. Item number.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Run item 10, please report out.
Where are we
You're not
doing?
looking at
We're item 10. Agenda item
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm wrong.
committee report.
Thank you. Committee report out, Finance Committee. We liked everything which we just talked about. We went through the check registers and all that stuff, and we saw nothing out of the ordinary. We did talk it, we really went over it very carefully with Mark. This was our third meeting with Mark. I think
Yeah,
that was good. So it's really come a long way and tightened up a lot. And originally it started off with the numbers had gone in the other direction, and Tom Warner said that can't be possible.
You know why we did it in that 5 years too? We spent $83 million in that 5 years. And, you know, that's a lot of change. We added a lot of projects, so it should go up.
So
What else did we do? We,
that was
in the change orders, we, our big project
Oh,
in
yeah.
Conus and Meadowcroft, we had a settlement agreement worked out,
Yeah.
disputes, and then we had credits for,
$300,000.
so the end result was we got a total project change order reduction
Right.
of about 130 or something like that on the project, so that's a good thing.
Thousand.
130,000.
Joe
That's
Barton
good.
is here. Joe Barton's on that. He's here.
Answering the
Of course,
doors.
that's a later agenda item.
Yes.
And then we took a look at the salary and benefit cost amount, and I think that was a very useful study to do. Remember we asked for that last meeting in the Finance Committee. What else did we looked at a lot of the items on the agenda.
Yeah.
We have a pretty thorough.
Financial policy.
Should we go on? CMSA.
All right. So we had a couple of things come up at CMSA. We agreed to an alternate retirement plan for temporary and part-time employees. We have a few employees that are interns and some people that are coming on during college. They're not there full-time, they're not there permanently, and there was no plan for them to save any money for their future. So we adopted something called the PARS Trust, Alternate Retirement Plan. There was some concern about this the earlier meeting because one of the representatives was unaware of it. It turns out that her district has been doing it for something like 25 years.
Since
It's been working great.
1991, to be exact.
Yeah. And
Love it.
the guy who's administering it came to the meeting for free last time, and will be administering it for like $87 a year. So the temporary and the part-time people have something to put in it, but it will not be pension liability. So we're not, and they're going to contribute, I think they did 3.5%, and we agreed at 3.5% as a contribution.
Do college students want to stay for the fall?
Well, that, they're allowed, put it this way, they have one shot at opting in. You opt in or you don't.
We also pre-approved the purchase of the new cogeneration engine, which should show up in about a year when it's ready to be plugged in, but we're going to probably sign all the papers to begin construction on that sometime in the first quarter of next year. Our broken cogen engine, which we bought a used reconditioned engine, and it's here, and it's purring along, and we are on hot days actually selling quite a bit of energy back from Marin Clean Energy. So
The new cogen will be larger and will have about 20% better efficiency. So it's great. And then we'll have the new reconditioned one as a backup. So that's going to work out well. We did accept that the slide repair was done. That was the slide repair on Anderson Drive.
That was a two-step process, wasn't it?
Yeah, we tried to claim it as done the month before, but it wasn't done the month before, so we did not. And we did have the clarifier gates project done. Those are the gates that can be lifted. They were manual, they're now electronic. That project has all of the gates now match each other, and that was an important project. And we had a presentation on the organic waste and power delivery programs, and that was done by Jason himself, which was very good. And he gave that presentation. Where you live in Denver? Where the heck was he giving that?
Chicago.
Chicago. And so that was great. It was very good about how we make power, and not every district is making power, so that's good.
For a little district, we're doing quite a bit in both of us, them. It's
The last thing I'd say is we also had a public hearing for our, over there, CMSA proposed fee ordinance for 2019. And fee schedules and capacity charges, waste hauling and industrial monitoring. So those fees, but they didn't change a lot.
What is it, engineering needs record adjustment, is that what it was?
No, it was all of the fees that they charge at CMSA, including, some of the things we do is we have waste haulers. We have to monitor some of the stuff that they bring in, so those are fees. We can't just have people bring stuff and not find out what's in it later, so those fees went up. Capacity fees went up.
North Bay Watershed Association.
Okay, we went on a tour, an outdoor tour in Kenwood. It is a project that's going all over. It's called the Re-Oak North Bay Project. So North Bay Watershed gave $15,000 to help replant oaks. I looked up, some information on re-oaking, and I guess in the last 70 years we've lost 1 million acres of oak habitat due to development disease. But now the icing on the cake is we're losing all these oaks from the fires. So it was a really kind of amazing project. They had volunteers involved. It was like we walked around all these seedlings. There were some little trees and some baby trees. And the effort on how they were able to put all these trees kind of up on a hill that had been burned. So it was amazing. And the volunteer group, and this is through the Napa County RCD, the Resource Conservation District. So you can see some of the pictures on here. And they're also really into this, what's called Land Smart, and it's all about future planning, water resources, and they do a lot of programs for kids. So it was really awesome to be outside. It was a perfect day. So I'm going to pass this around and you can look at this. And I did go to the Joint Technical Committee. Do you want me to talk about that now or not, or what?
Sure.
I don't have to. So they only meet like every 3 months sometimes. This is through the North Bay Watershed, and they're a committee that helps give input into the North Bay Watershed about projects, also about NPDES compliance, wastewater discharges, and TMDL regulations, as well as stormwater runoff. But they also are a totally different group, though they're like, I would say maybe a third of the people that go are from North Bay Watershed. And Chris Chu is there, she's from the county, she's from Public Works. She helped drives the meetings, and Judy Kelly's there also. So it was a great meeting. It was some on strategic planning and asking what is your organization's mission, how you are achieving it, and they have all these different questions. I found it to be very helpful and organized. So if we want to talk about strategic plan, our plan, this might be a nice guide to help you kind of look maybe what we could do. We also talked about One Water again and looking at funding sources. I guess, as we know, Prop 1 has a lot of money. Marin got 28% in the last round, which I thought was interesting. We also talked about the North Bay upcoming conference for next year. And they're going to need donations. Well, I won't go at all. So overall, it was a planning meeting on looking at a regional plan. I brought up the issue on recycling, how are we recycling water in Marin County? Sonoma is just light years ahead of Marin. And I brought up, I think, Steve, you mentioned it was only a few percent. So they started to problem solve about how we connect. And these are people that are wear different hats. They're not just board members, so they're all about regional planning. And then we also talked about sustainable groundwater, and I guess the government's now coming up with some new guidelines. And I think that's pretty much it for now.
Okay. Number 11, verbal reports by board members and staff and requests for future items.
Well, I got one or two.
Yeah, as far as staff, actually don't have anything to really report. I mean, I could talk about, I could always chat about things. But there's nothing of great importance, we've got some more business to deal with, so.
Can you give a 2-second update? Sorry, for Larkspur Landing and what's just that we're going to divide it into.
Oh, yes, and, I talked about it last month a bit, the decision has been made. And we're now going into the process, we're not actually excavating anymore at this time. We've completed about 3/4 of the project, and all the hazardous material is long gone. And so now we're just backfilling and getting to surface restoration and hydroseeding grass restoration, because we're going to issue a notice of termination on the stormwater permit. And what that means is we won't have to do active inspection or monitoring, because we're going to button down the site so it looks a lot like it did when we began. We're going to have topsoil, grass, and those areas that we haven't excavated yet will be undisturbed, and those areas we have excavated will be backfilled and protected so that we don't have any construction-related runoff as the wet season begins. And we will restart as soon as the dry season comes into full force, estimated around the beginning of May, and complete the remaining quarter of the excavation in a technically difficult area next to the wetlands and the big wall that's on the site. Special shoring is needed, and we put that work off until we have more dry season ahead of us to complete that work.
Okay, any more verbal reports from board?
Yeah, we had, Doug and I met for the education plan. Always a fun meeting. So we had a PowerPoint on future options to do, I guess, more PCAs. Also school outreach and scholarship, we talked about that. What else did we talk about?
We've got other agencies, Steve, joining our advertisement.
I got 4 right now.
What are the other agencies that are joining our paid Comcast?
We're looking at SASM, Mill Valley part of SASM. Corte Madera said they're very interested. San Rafael was very interested. And they're making commitments, it's not on paper.
Good.
So, and then Las Colinas, I talked to Greg Pease.
Good.
So,
Critical
That was the
mass.
plan the whole way, is to get other people to Hey, Penny, then we can probably put these things on forever.
Yeah.
If they get along, yeah.
Here is a scholarship application that Nixus brought, and here is just one other item, the fog, the kitty fog. Do they color that or fill it out or something?
Yeah, they have about, I think, 30 different versions, depending on what age group, but the summer coloring guides, some have, you know, they're all meant to be fun and educational.
We did talk about our education costs, and it sounds like we're narrowing our costs for our education group. Because if NB5 needs 200,000, so we're going to drop to 50,000. But if there's issues, I'm sure we could probably work it out, move some of those dollars around. I don't have anything else, Doug, do you?
I don't have any.
Any requests for, oh,
No, I have an item.
Doug has an item.
So I received a letter from a ratepayer, and I know this is a little bit of a sticky wicket, but I'm looking to see either to have this put on the agenda or an ad hoc subcommittee put on. I'll give you briefly. The Ross Valley Sanitary District granted a $13,000 lateral loan. The work was done, and then the grant was revoked. This is somebody who just moved here, and in fact was complaining. I met them at the Larkspur meeting regarding our rate increases, and they were saying, I just moved in here, and you're increasing my rates. Now we had them spend $13,000 and denied them the loan. Now I understand the reason for us. My understanding is subsequent to the work being done, it was learned that it's a shared lateral. So I guess somewhere in there it says there's a shared lateral. It seems to me there's got to be, and maybe some advice from our attorney. I know you guys met about that. I wasn't in the meeting, but this just seems, you know, I can't see how we can grant somebody $13,000, have them do the work, and then turn around and say no. I mean, this puts people in an unbelievably hardship position when they just bought a home. I think they bought their home 6 months ago.
I'll tell you what I would suggest is that we have a committee, maybe you and I could meet and go over all that, and if it rises to the level of a board issue next time, we can put it on for a future agenda.
And do you have any opinion about that already?
No, I don't think I know enough to have an opinion about it. It's not great optics.
It's what? Yeah.
It's not right.
Well, I think the concern is, my concern about this, and I'm not going to take it too far, is we just had an ordinance where we said 50%, not 80, and are we now saying, if there's an ordinance, I have a problem with that, so we may need some legal advice. That's what I'm saying.
Let's have a committee.
Good. You and me.
Is that okay with everybody?
Okay, thank you.
So let's do that. Okay.
Good.
Because, you know, we don't want to get in a position.
We're still on,
We're still recording out?
no, request for future items.
Okay, I got one.
Okay, Pam has one.
I would like us to review the communications policy.
To do what?
Review the communications policy. I have done some research, and I believe there's a potential Brown Act violation with the chair being CC'd, all of our emails. So I'd like that policy to be reviewed and address that.
I think that's actually valid. If her emails to staff always get CC'd to the board president, she's no longer allowed to confer with another council member or board member who she might wish to consult with, because that would be a sequential meeting. So if Pam said something to me and then wrote an email to you and you sent it to him, now we just had a Brown Act violation. And that
I think we
can't.
should look at that.
Yeah, I checked with CSDA, so. Okay, I think that's, oh, one more. Is it possible, I don't know, maybe it's too soon, but I'm wondering about us doing a survey about the Larkspur Landing property with the public. We're paying NB5 tons of money. I just think it would be kind of to help us. I don't know, maybe it's a waste of time and money, but I just wondered what you all thought about that.
I think in light of the fact that my understanding is subsequent to the full remediation, we can't do anything with that property for 2 years. So I'd say it's premature. We're now 2.5 years out of that.
Okay,
People will forget.
I got it.
Because we took out what am I trying to say, a bond.
Bond.
And in order to meet the terms of the bond, we can't unload that property. And I'm not saying we are unloading it, because we haven't been given direction by the public, but we can't sell it.
A disposition of the property.
But
Disposition
of the property.
And is the limit on disposition of property or limit on paying back the loan to
Paying back the
Mr.
loan.
Hmm?
Paying back the loan.
Okay, so you
We-
could
we-
sell it, but you
No.
can't
No.
use the money.
No.
No.
You cannot.
No. Can't do.
In order to qualify for tax exempt bonds, and we discussed this at great length, you know, we have to, there's a 10% of the bond term, we cannot
We have to
receive
own
any,
it for a minimum time.
we can't receive any proceeds or revenue for 10% of the bond term.
And if we ask people questions now and we do something in 2 years from now, they'll have forgotten, you know.
Okay,
Okay, but it's at the right time, I agree.
Okay. Let's, if there's nothing else,
can I ask a quick
Sure.
question? When do we talk about announcements on the agenda? I have a couple, one announcement or two. Is that on the
Yeah,
agenda?
it says verbal report
Okay, I'll
by
wait.
board members.
Oh, wait, wait.
No, we're in that.
no, we're in that right now.
This is the item we're in.
Okay, so take back day for pharmaceuticals is October 26th from 10 to 2 p.m. at the Fairfax Police Department. I do not know what else is going on around the county, but it's probably generally.
It's at multiple sites.
Yeah, usually, yeah. Then the other announcement I had, just 30 seconds here. I met a woman who is in charge of what's called Watershed Alliance of Marin. Didn't even know it existed, but it has a lot to do with watersheds, et cetera, in Marin County. So I just wanted to say, here it is, it's info. I think it would be nice sometime to have them come in and do a 5-minute presentation, because there is a lot of organizations that, I know we have friends at Port of Madera Creek, but I still think it would be interesting to bring in a person to teach us.
What was the woman's name?
Lauren somebody.
We'll pass that to staff.
Yeah,
Director Mates, I'm sorry, when was the Take Back Pharmaceuticals Day in October?
October 26th.
Okay.
Pass this to staff.
And I'm just thinking it would help us maybe learn more about the watershed. So there's many groups here.
Full disclosure, I have a nonprofit organization that is a member of Watershed Alliance,
Oh, them?
Friends of Willow Creek.
There you go. Okay, let's move. Item 12, consent calendar. Matters listed under this item are considered routine and will be enacted in one motion. The consent calendar may include resolutions. Therefore, the motion, second, and vote will also be applicable to the resolutions and recorded accordingly. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a board member, by a member of the board, or the public prior to the time of the board votes on the motion to adopt. Anybody in the public want to?
Is there any request to take any of these off?
That's what I was-
Briefly, E.
Okay, yes,
Let's-
and Jill's here for
let's
that.
do
Yeah, pull that off, but I do want to mention for 12G, Ben Schick of Chocolate Wheeler has come in person and is available for any questions about the force main appurtenances project.
When you said the
And, but yeah, you have the staff report but Ben actually has been a consultant for the district for many years and is an asset for us, one of our human assets, still district.
I wouldn't want to call you infrastructure.
Yeah.
Not that long.
But there was already design work that he's done for 4 of the air release valves / isolation valves, which are, these are big valves on big force main. And we had some information from the field that 4 additional units out there should be looked at and redesigned to get our system up and running to accept the load of service. So the proposal is to enhance engineering design budget and engineering services during construction for the next construction season. So I just wanted to introduce Ben, and I don't know, Ben, you want to make any brief comments to the board on what you've been doing and what you're planning to do?
How did you pick these four? What came up?
It was just basically based on coordination with the
what?
operation and maintenance staff.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a couple of isolation valves that actually do not function anymore. They can't actually close the valve or open the valve, and then a couple of the existing air valves are no longer functional as well. Basically, the pipe between the force main and the air valve is plugged up and doesn't function, so we need to get those replaced. So.
and these are somewhat dangerous, aren't they? Potentially dangerous.
They're SSO risks. They reduce capacity. You know, if you have an inoperable air release valve, well, then the gas is not allowed to escape, so it creates this higher pressure bubble within the pipe system. It's essentially a blockage for flow, so it reduces your capacity.
Yeah, they actually noticed that when they have to operate a couple of the pump stations excessively over when they normally would, they know that one of the air release valves downstream of that is plugged up, so they go down there, they unplug it, and then all of a sudden the pump station doesn't have to operate quite as frequently. And it's, you know, if we can get that to function properly all the time, you'll have more capacity, it'll be more efficient. So,
Can they explode?
can they explode?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, the gases could explode if you were to, you know, just that it's a hazardous gas. The air release valve itself is, it doesn't have anything, it doesn't have electricity to it. It's just basically a mechanical piece of equipment that's allowing the air to purge from the force mains. So,
Yeah, they tend to be at high points.
they're at high points, and they're actually designed to also protect the force main. So if you have surges in the force main, it's actually designed so your force main doesn't explode, right? So it'll purge the air, it'll let air back in, it'll basically kind of reduce the impacts to the surrounding force main.
So we just watched the video of all of the burning and explosions in East Bay. That's not,
Yes.
want to make sure that that's not a possibility.
No. At some of the pump stations, sometimes there is an explosion risk because you have a hazardous gas near electrical units and things like that. So that's why we have clearance requirements and things to minimize the risk of the explosion. But these are isolated units in a vault somewhere. So.
Thanks.
You know, thank you, Ben. And another dimension of this is that there's sort of a human dimension on the operation and maintenance. Many collection systems, the folks have been there for many years, they quit operating these valves or exercising them, and then they become rusted looking, and they might even be made of galvanized steel, rust together, you know, and be inoperable. And then there's a fear factor if you're a maintenance worker to go in there and actually exercise it. What's going to happen to the, you know, what kind of gas explosion is going to come out of this thing? And so this human aspect of it is common in collection systems where this infrastructure that's been put in 40, 50 years ago or 20 years is not operable and it's not being operated. And so this is an opportunity by doing this capital project and refreshing this technology. We will then also embed operation and maintenance of the new units. So that becomes regular work orders so that we don't fall into that trap of having inoperable units. So this is a chance for our agency to kind of start afresh on these multiple, 8 units, and then embed that in our day-to-day work, month to month, so that we don't run into this issue of having, what Ben said, which is 3 or 4 valves that simply don't work and are putting stress on our system.
So that was 12G. Doug?
I think it's worth talking.
I just wanted to commend staff. It's rare that we see credits on change orders. It's really a testament to the eyes and talent of the staff that are keeping an eye on what these projects are, to the management of the people, the consultants we hire to manage it, and to see it drop $333,611.30 is good for ratepayers. I just want to say thank you.
Jim, we'll have a cookie.
Thank you very much.
I think we should vote on that.
I'll wait till you vote, yeah.
Okay. If there's nothing else from the public or the board, consent calendar. Do you have a motion?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
13. Ooh, thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay, put your
Thanks,
feet up.
guys. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Good to meet you. See you soon.
Discussion and direction on Ross Valley Sanitary District financial policies. Do we want to take 2 or 3 minutes? Anybody need a quick break? Anybody need a quick break? Okay, let's go. Discussion and direction on Ross Valley Sanitary District financial policies. And Felicia, I think, is gonna talk about this.
Yes, thank you. I am bringing to you our 13 financial policies that were adopted by the board in November 2017 with some suggested updates and edits. It's been 2 years, almost 2 years. And during that time, staff has taken note of suggestions from the finance committee and also from the rate study consultant, most recently in the spring, about how our financial policies could be updated, made more clear and more in alignment with district practices. So the first significant change that I would bring to the board's attention is the addition of guiding principles, which is added here, I think, in the second or third policy. These guiding principles were recommended to us by members of the Finance Committee, who also served on the board of CMSA. CMSA, I think, has a similar set of guiding principles. We made some modifications to them so that they would align with the district practices, and received additional feedback from the Finance Committee, who reviewed them with us yesterday. I'll let them speak to that. And the second most significant change I would bring to the board's attention is the changes to our reserve policy. And again, this specific modification was based on suggestions that arose from conversations with the rate study consultants, specifically regarding our capital reserves, but also our operating reserves, specifying minimum and target reserves, and also that our operating reserves would be, rather than any specific 6 months of the year, as I think it was previously written, that it would just be simply 50% of our operating reserves, which makes it quite a bit simpler and not a significant difference in dollars. With that, obviously there's a few other places where there's some red line edits, and happy to discuss with the board or answer any questions that you might have, and welcome any additional suggested edits to this set of policies, which I'll bring back to the board in a future meeting for adoption.
Board? Tom?
Well, we discussed this at the Finance Committee, and I think it's really a great piece of work. We had some comments, and one is that when we were doing the rate study, our consultant tried to get us to meet the capital reserve. And the capital reserve is equal to the average of the annual 10-year CIP for capital, annual capital expenses. And our rates were going to be like 8 to 9, they were really up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're going, whoa, we just can't do that. So we have not met our target for the capital reserve. We have never met it. And I don't think we have any money in it now, really. So I'm proposing that we reduce it. I think of 100% of the averages, we've got a $2 million reserve. And I was thinking, so we go on to page 143 of 198, maintain a CIP reserve at an amount equal to, and I'm saying 25%.
What page?
It's
143.
It's the guiding principles of financial planning.
Third line down.
No, it's the fifth line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Maintain a capital reserve at an amount equal to I'm saying 25% of the annual average value. And that'd be something like $2.5 million.
Why don't we just say something like $2.5 million?
We could, or we could say about 2 million.
Why don't we do that? I don't,
We could do that, because
I
I
think that's
said
better
about
wordsmithing
that
than 25% of 10-year.
too.
Looks like we were going for 10 years and we decided not to.
We ought to say, instead of maintain, shoot for,
Aim for.
target.
Shoot for is politically incorrect these days.
Oh, I
How
know
about, how
that.
about target?
Target.
I'm not even sure that's good.
How about
So long, shoot for.
project?
Aim
How
for,
about-
I'll
how about
get to that.
project? Project.
Project. Well, anyway, let's think of a word for that one. Project.
Project works.
No.
Yeah.
But of $2 million.
You can wordsmith that.
Isn't our 10-year CIP value skewed based on how much work we've been doing? I mean,
Yeah, but it's gonna be.
and then also that we are doing it, we're not sitting around waiting for a CIP emergency, right?
It's still, it's gonna go down, but it's 8 to 9 million a year.
You mean, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
complaining about.
I mean, to your point, right, it should be maybe it should be a lesser number than
Yeah.
this based on.
It is gonna go down though.
I mean, I assume this is pulled from some sort of best practices.
Well, CMSA has this guiding principle, and I think there was an average of the 10-year CIP.
Yeah.
So you see that, I think, is pretty common in financial policies, as an average over a long period of time, recognizing that the CIP can be, 15 million one year and 5 million the next year, so an average being $10 million.
But setting an amount is good, because we do have a $2 million emergency reserve, which is funded.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what I think we ought to do.
We are different than CMSA, because our landscape out there in the Ross Valley, we don't know exactly what's going to hit us, and our projects are going to change pretty dramatically.
Well, and what is the current annual average?
About $10 million.
It's quite a bit higher though now, I think is what Mary was saying, is because our current year's CIP is 30, well, it's almost 30 million. Right, so if you put that into the
Goes
average.
out over 10, and then the average for the form is 7 or 8, so it's 10 million.
I think it's reasonable. I don't think there's any reason to have a number that we are never going to reach.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And it appears again, you got a wordsmith on page 156. You pointed that out to me. And then there's a couple of other things that are on page 162, refunding bonds. Trump's tax thing eliminated advance refund, so we're going to cross that out. It's on section 9.6.
Yeah, right here. In advance of the call date,
Yeah, you can't do that.
you can't do that.
And then on page 165, we're in these medium-term notes. See up there, medium-term notes. Eligible, down about in the middle, eligible investments shall be rated AAA. A maximum of 30% of the portfolio may be invested in this category. That's gigantic. I mean, usually they say no more than 4%.
Why would we say 30?
Well, this policy actually was drafted with our financial advisors, with Jim and Martha, in November 2017. And so, yeah, it was, so it must have been based
It
on
is
a
AAA, but.
on a template that they
I
were
don't,
working from. That said, the board has discretion to modify that. And if you'd like to see a lower number,
I'd like to see 5% or something like that.
I have a 10.
Have we, do we?
What,
have we
so what
bought any
exactly will this
medium-term
have?
notes?
This will restrict how we may invest?
Yes,
Or-
yes.
So the district could make investment decisions. We don't typically. The only investments that we have are with Leaf and with BNY Mellon, which is our bond trustee. The bond trustee does make investment decisions on behalf of the district in accordance with these financial policies. So when the financial policies are updated, we would then forward that to BNYO.
And they would invest up to 30% without the board approval?
They would invest according to our adopted financial policies.
Without the board approval?
Yes.
Because this would be the guiding,
Yeah,
wow, that's a lot.
yes.
Well, it's a maximum.
But believe me, you really want to diversify your portfolio. You don't want to own 30% of anything in your portfolio.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you would.
So are you okay with the 10% on the money market funds and the 30% on the negotiable certificates of
Money
deposit?
market funds are pretty much dollar
Right.
day to day, so
Okay.
you won't have a big
So
potential loss.
What about the what about the CDs? 30% in CDs.
You know, what you do with CDs is you buy them in different places, you know, because they're federally insured up to 200,000.
Okay, so that is diversified by,
If they do that, but I don't know if, what we did in Section 1 is we said the district's investments are limited to this, you know, like us investing. But
I don't know that.
investment advisors can follow, we have a list of things for them.
Right.
And that was the right way to do it.
I
so,
remember that.
yeah.
I'd be happy to look at that,
Yeah, I-
CMSA investment policy.
Yeah, it's two categories. What we invest in, we don't want to lose $100,000 in
Right.
investment. We'd be in the papers and we'd be fools.
right?
So going back to that medium-term notes, there's a last sentence there and it says, the amount invested, blah, blah, and then it says 20% of the portfolio. Wouldn't that be changed too, or?
Yeah, then that's only with one issuer. You know, that's even worse.
Should we just get rid of it? Or what?
Well, I kind of like the idea of getting the CMSA thing. What we can invest in and what an investment advisor can do. The bank could, Ellen has what, our reserve funds or?
Our bond proceeds.
The bond proceeds, yeah. And we're spending that,
What's the plan?
I would like to, you know, well, I think this is a work in progress, you know. Then I had a bunch of other comments, but they were all correct. I mean, you know, I was,
Talking it.
yeah,
Okay.
just those two.
Well, I agree with you on the 30%, I think on particular wisdom part, so, yeah. So put that at 5, that would be fine with me. And the rest, we don't have to, we're reviewing this, we're not settling it.
Discussion and direction.
Yeah, there you go. There we go.
Yeah. And we've limited the capital reserve, and maybe when we sell an asset, we can put the money in the reserve. That's how we can make it. Okay, that's all I have.
Pam?
Yeah, going back to the guiding principles on page 143, it says balance the operating budget over the planning period. I think that's really, really super vague. I'm not sure what balance means. To me, it's like, I don't know. And then the planning period, I'm not sure what that means. Is that 5 years? Is it 10 years? I don't know if there's some more specific language on that maybe?
Yeah, I can work on that, and I think that's a good point that you bring up, because CMSA actually has a planning period of 2 years. They have a 2-year budget that they've now.
So maybe over the budget period.
Maybe over the budget.
Annually balance the budget, and balance means fund the budget, you know.
Yeah, just,
Annually, that's a good point, actually.
when you say ensure adequate funding for the CIP, what does that mean? I don't know what ensure means, is it? Because we really don't know what that CIP program's,
It means adequately fund the.
I don't know, how can we say ensure it when we don't even know if we have the money for it, I guess? I don't know, something to measure it or be specific more about?
Well, I think that we have, you know, we have in our budget what this CIP project is gonna cost. And So we, before we can, if it's in the budget, it means we plan for the money to be there. We don't put it in the budget and then go, please, Lord. Let's hope by next
Okay,
March
that's fine,
we've
that's
got
fine.
something coming in.
It's fine.
Does Central Marin write that one up differently? See if they do.
No, that's how they.
That's their example. I know what it means, but
Yeah.
we want to fund our CIP.
Yeah.
It might mean that we need bonds or an SRF loan,
We figure out how to do
or
it.
we do it over 2 years or something like that. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Well, we did that at CMSA. We said, look, we can't fund it on year 2, so let's put it out to year 4. What do you think about that? And they said, yeah, it'll probably last till then. So we were able to, here's what funding sources we've got. What can we do? And what can we push out? Okay, anything else, Pam?
No?
Okay. Doug?
No, I'm good on that.
We're going to bring this back.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Larry, any?
Mr. President.
Okay. Tom needs to leave now, and I wish your wife well. She fell at Trader Joe's the other day, and broke her knee. So she's home. Okay, item 14, I think we're up to? Yes. So, discussion and direction on policy regarding agency comments on proposed legislation.
Oh, yeah, no, I have another copy. Okay, thank you.
Staff, Julia?
Sure, I'll take it. Okay, so this is an item that is on the agenda by request from Director Meggs regarding whether the agency should have a policy related to commenting or weighing in on pending legislation. And I think the fundamental question is whether, related to how this came up, whether through one of the trade associations or representative associations like CSDA, if they send out a, hey, sanitary districts, here's a form letter to send to legislator X regarding their pending bill, because we have strong feelings about it, please sign here and send. Whether the general manager is authorized to do that, whether there are, the general manager needs to check in with the board chair or the entire board before doing that. I think that occurred this summer, and the general manager worked with the board president to massage the letter a little bit and send it, and then it was reported out at the meeting. So staff has prepared a pretty brief staff report on this item and set forth a form of policy that, for the board's consideration, not necessarily this is how you should do it, but different agencies take different approaches. I know that certain boards delegate authority to the general manager, and other boards want to see these every time. So it's really up to the discretion of the board as to how you want to move forward, and I believe we're going to be in the process of continuing and completing our policy, the rest of the board's policies over the next couple or few months, so this could be part of that. So I think that the goal here is discussion and direction to staff on if there should be a policy and what that policy might look like.
That's great, and what was just passed out was something Director Meggs brought to our attention after the board packet was already assembled, but it was actually CSDA's very well, clearly written potential model policies on this. So what you saw in the staff report was an example that we got from Novato as just one, the city of Novato's approach. But this handout it lays out 4 different policy approaches if a policy were desired. So, A, does the board want to have a policy, given that, we did execute according to what is described under model policy 2 of this handout? Is that good enough, or would you like to go ahead and formalize that? And these are some model policies, as Andrea mentioned, different dimensions. You can delegate to the general manager, you can delegate to the general manager with board president, you can have the full board adopt all 4 petitions, or general manager adopts bill positions consistent with policy principles that are set up in anticipation of any comments, which is pretty complicated. But those are 4 different approaches if you want to have a policy. And so many special districts don't have policies, but as Andrea mentioned, and I would, and we put in our staff report, and Andrea worked on this in 2016 with those of you who were on the board. There are a few policies that we can kind of put into one bound location, make it more readily available, and then there were a list of policies that you were considering that haven't been adopted yet. So it's a chance to kind of brush those off, get them before you, and review that list of things so we have a common understanding of what policies are out there that guide our actions and what areas we don't need policies for. When you have a policy, you're prescribing a certain approach, and that's a decision the board can make and send staff in that direction.
Can I just pass this out? This is the other part that I forgot. Oh, yeah. We've got this one.
It is. It's what.
Well, we don't have a policy for while this is being passed out. We try to just use best business practices. And, from what I read, we can have so many policies that, it seems like what we've been doing follows what Novato did, and also what, is one of the 4 options in CSDA. So if we made a policy, it would be.
No, I don't think that comports with what we talked about last spring. I wrote a letter to Larkspur, and we agreed on it, we wordsmithed it, and then the next day, I was the board president, and the letter went out, and it was completely different, and we agreed that we can't do that. But moreover, I come from a background, I've been on the council, where nobody writes on behalf of the town a letter to legislators unless the town council agrees to that. There could be, and we could have a board policy where, okay, wait a minute, and I think it said something along the lines of the general manager adopts bill provisions consistency with policy principles set by board of directors and trustees in the event that it's a short. This thing's got to go out Tuesday. Our next board meeting's a month from now. Maybe we can do a little bit of a hybrid. I'd like to see things that come out from this board, signed by the board president. I'd like to see, I might not agree with it. I may not think it's good policy.
I don't,
So-
I think, well, Pam, go ahead.
I did some research, it's getting late, on Novato. So Novato is a city, and they're guided by the League of Cities. So if they can't do a vote, the manager and the chair do it. But we're a special district. I did talk to Eric Lucan. I did talk to Pam Drew about that policy. They weren't real happy about it because they didn't always go along with it. So I did my research on that. I'm from the old school too. It's like, I don't want my name, or, it says district, but if I had no action, no voting power, no nothing, and it's put out there, I don't want any part of it. And it's kind of a decision that's made for me without my vote. So I have a lot of concern about that. I mean, I understand there was a time crunch here. I mean, and that probably doesn't happen, but it was known about, I think, in July, because I was at the leadership conference and they were talking about it there. And I don't know when the letter, I can't remember when the letter was sent in. But I think for best practices and as a transparency issue, I really feel strongly that we need to figure out a way that it feels like I'm not having somebody vote for me without my vote. And that's happened on this board in the past, unfortunately. I mean, there was a lot of stuff flying out of here that was not being voted on. And so it's nothing like it was then. But I'm a little nervous about how this went down. And then if it goes down that way, I think by the First Amendment rights, I have the right to notify Levine and McGuire. I didn't have any part of this. You know, the district sent out a letter and it says, the district voted on this in favor or not favor of this legislation. And I didn't have any part of it.
It didn't say it voted.
No.
It didn't say it voted, it said it's
It was
supporting the position.
supporting, right. Supporting it or not, then I think I have the right to say to them, hey, if I wasn't part of that. So that's my little
Well, I think
2
we have the right to
cents.
say that, I don't think I would say that, but let me get back to the story I told about being on Parks and Rec and the real grass. Again, I casually said in the meeting, or to I think it was a reporter, it was in the paper, oh, we would never ever support, the Parks and Rec Commission would never support artificial turf at Memorial Park. And the next day, I told you this before, I get like 19 phone calls, including the town attorney, the town manager, the town mayor, another town councilor, and 3 members of my commission, all of which said, we completely agree with you, you had no business saying that.
Right. Well,
I mean,
and that,
nobody said that.
I think there's a big distinction between that and taking a position on something that CSDA or CASA has to ask the district to take a position on. And this board used to have people just go and everybody got to say whatever they wanted to the press, and I think we're not talking about that tonight.
Right, no,
We're
right,
talking about.
We have a policy on that.
If CSDA or CASA says we want a letter of support, do we want to delegate to the board chair and the general manager to send such a letter? I don't actually, I mean, given the way these lobbying efforts are set up, and I work in the world where they're like, urgent action, send a letter, it doesn't make that much difference,
Well, it's also not
right?
that
So
urgent.
I would say, if we don't want any letters to go out without full board approval, and it could be on consent, then we say to CSDA and CASA, we don't like those deadlines. We're not set up to do that. We're not willing to hold a special meeting, and we're not willing to send a letter of support. I don't think it's gonna be a big deal to them. I understand why Tom did it when he did it, because we haven't discussed it. I don't think it's that controversial. I don't even remember what the
I
specific
don't either.
legislation was, right?
This is about affordable housing.
Okay, so I would say probably in most instances, the president of the board probably would be going along with everything we would care about in terms of how this, how our sanitation collection system world works. But there might be some conflict, so.
I'm just, if this was put before me, I would look at it exactly the way that Doug just said is, when is, like, the legislature is voting on it next week. And these
In
letters.
some committee, and
In
it's gonna
some-
go to another committee, and it's gonna go to another committee, like, anyway, it's never, these kind of letters are never.
And I would hope that our general manager would also weigh that consideration and say, of what kind of critical nature is this? And that would be discussed. And, one of, I'm not gonna, well, this is me personally, so maybe, we do want to have a policy about it. But, if we had to, if the general manager could convince the board chair that this was important to do, and maybe the board chair could check with one other person, so as not to do.
That's a.
So as not, that's what I said one of them,
Yeah,
just
but
one.
I want to err on the other side, Michael. I want to err on the side of, why don't we just decide these letters are not make or break. If it was something that was so vital to this district, let's hold a special meeting. And it's probably never going to be that. I think this was, and out of an abundance of caution, say, and I don't, the first paragraph of this draft, which I know is just for consideration, scares me, because I don't want any member of this board to say, oh, I think Ross Valley Sanitary District should be taking a position on, whatever.
Yeah.
I guess medical marijuana is done.
Oh,
So
yeah.
on something else, and bring it before the board in this process. I think it needs to be germane to the district's business.
Yeah, we did that, yeah.
So then I would say we're only talking about letters that the CSDA and Tom noted before he left, it should be
Yeah,
CASA
CASA.
also, ask for us. It should be very limited to, the scope of our business.
I agree with that.
We shouldn't start, And I think maybe that gets to what Pam's concern about this was, that we were in a way weighing in on an affordable housing issue. No? Okay, I don't even remember it.
No, because.
Why don't you tell, can you refresh us?
We were weighing in on a surplus land act
That's right.
amendment. And our financial viability depends on the disposal of surplus land, based on the strategy we've
And
been
property.
working so hard on in the last 10 months.
Okay.
And so that might be something that leads to a special meeting.
Yeah.
We needed time, it's, okay. As a member of CSDA, we're a member. They look to members to provide case studies to identify unintended consequences of proposed legislation. And so we have, through the activities of this district in the last 10 months, a crystal clear example of potential unintended consequences of prescriptive state mandated requirements on disposition of surplus land. Okay, that potentially put us at risk. So we have a case study. As a member of CSDA, they're looking throughout the state as they have these negotiations and talk about potential legislation that has the purpose of enhancing affordable housing, a laudable purpose that we all believe in, could have unintended consequences. And our case study is maybe one of the best in the state to illustrate why you don't want to be too prescriptive on a special district's disposition strategy for its land.
And your explanation of that was excellent. I think you and I spoke about this briefly, and we discussed that this particular legislation would not be too harmful to us, or would not harm us. That's the way it was written. But your point is well taken, but to my point, that letter should be signed in ink by 5 board members and the general manager.
They needed it for a meeting with the assembly member that week.
And I'm okay with a policy that, and we can work on this, I can put this off to next week. Maybe Andrea can help write, exactly takes the where's the one that you gave me? I would say, that's because that's another way. Policy 3 with a little bit of a policy 4 in there. If there's an emergency, go for it, and then report out at the next meeting, which is what we did. But we don't have a policy, and if we write these letters, which don't come out that many,
what we
I'd rather
did
just let it
was-
come to the board in the first place.
We did model policy 2. We adhered to that. But I would.
We don't have it, that's not our policy.
But I would submit, no, I'm just saying what happened in this case example. We implemented under the policy 2. But I would put forward that based on the extensive discussions that we had on our financial strategy leading up to that time in late June, early July, I was communicating policy principles that
I agree with
you
that.
all have established through your decision making.
No, I agree with that.
And as your general manager, I was representing the 5 of you in terms of making a decision that required a timely response. So in my opinion, I was doing 4, but you all can have your opinion about that. So, it's.
Can we continue this
Yeah,
item?
I'll tell you what. We're just gonna
Partially because I think it's
discuss
worth
and
fleshing
provide.
out a little bit more,
Yeah,
but.
yeah, but I'd like to see.
We've lost Tom and.
I'd like to see, I don't think you did anything wrong. We don't have a policy, so there's no concern there.
And also, we're not a town or, we're a special district focused on wastewater
Right.
that has surplus land.
Oh, yeah, that's of value. So I'd like to see if we can wordsmith a little bit of a model policy 3 with a 4 in there as a kicker. Because if somebody's asked us to write a letter and it's coming up a month from now, why don't we just put it on the next consent calendar?
Right.
And just have that as a policy?
Well, but he was saying, I know, I can totally imagine the CSDA folks like, we're meeting with the assembly member, we need the letter right now. And I would push back and say,
That's what they always say.
Yeah, which assembly member is it, and, anyway, that's kind of just a way to get.
Yeah.
I think we could, and also, you are certainly, I think, at liberty to go educate the legislators about issues in our district, which is very different from taking a position on a piece of legislation, right? So you went to, we have this case study that demonstrates the unintended consequences. In the nonprofit world, we can't lobby more than 20%, but we can educate all day long, right? So in a way, I think maybe the more important thing you had to offer was the case study of what the unintended consequences would be without even, I would say, getting a letter from us saying, this is what we think about the legislation. I mean,
Right, well,
it'd be like,
good point.
it would, I don't know if you care, but it would screw us. and,
Right.
and anyway, so,
Yeah.
but I also
That's
think we
where
have
we're-
one
yeah.
instance of something that is probably not gonna happen again, and so we can spend a lot of time trying to come up with a policy for one thing that I think we all kind of hope doesn't come up again necessarily, or at least might not.
Well, I think we should set a policy on, board policy on excess lanes.
Hopefully, we won't have any. Let's see, we
That might
have,
solve a lot of the
That
problem
would
here.
solve the
so
problem.
we have direction.
Yeah, we have direction, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
By the time, just to note, by the time we come back, the thing may be passed, so,
Well, I don't think it actually affected us the way it was written.
I know.
It was sent to the governor on the 9th.
So did staff have enough direction?
What I heard was that the board would like to continue the discussion, but that there's also an interest in maybe combining 3 and 4 as a custom policy.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
Item 15, monthly operations and maintenance metrics report. And salary and benefit cost effects on the fiscal year we asked.
We're still looking at this flow to CMSA going down. I hope that continues. I said that when it was 49, then it was 45, then it was 45, now it's 44. I don't know what we're going to see this winter, but it's going in the right direction.
Before the meeting started, Steve said he hopes it rains so he can see how this system works. And I was like, wow, you are confident.
I'm actually really hopeful that this winter, so much work got done in the last 2 seasons, that this winter really we'll see a change at the high flow. I guess we'll find out. Nobody knows. I did note that there was a lot of sewer covers replaced, 24 manhole repairs, so that's great. I mean, fiscal year to date, 30, but 24 this month.
It was manhole cover month?
Yep.
Well, it was a lot of manhole rehab
Okay.
and getting in there and then doing the chimneys. So,
Was it, from the hub in San Anselmo, was it that whole stretch there you all were working on?
no, my guys were all over Larkspur, San Anselmo, and Greenbury. So we go in surgical. We're like special forces.
What was the noise complaint?
You're a mobile sewer crisis.
Yeah, rattly manhole cover.
Really?
Yeah, so sometimes
It was repaired?
we just put a
Did I get a 1 hour air on the other
It was
pitch?
derailed.
yeah, he did real quickly.
That's great, Steve. I love these people.
On the item B there, at the last board meeting, we approved new job classifications, and we asked for some clarification about what that was, with some more digging in, what it was gonna cost the district, what was the actual cost. So,
Thank you. We weren't far from, you might remember I had some numbers and sheets in front of me, and we had calculated about $370,000 impact. Well, as the table shows, that was correct. But the complication and the caveats we were giving was, we had budgeted some of that based on the May 2019 study, right? So it was hard for us to answer actually how that impacted the budget. Part of those costs were anticipated, part weren't. What this table 15B shows clearly is there were certain budgeted expenses and certain that were not. So And Felicia helped put this together, working with Melvin Garcia, our finance supervisor. And the net impact compared to what the budget was $110,000 of the decision in September. Based on some vacancies we have currently, if you assume half a year vacancy for those 3 positions, it comes out to about that amount. So the conclusion is we don't have to make a budget amendment.
Okay.
And so this is just an info sheet, but it gives you specific
Thank you.
impacts on each of those aspects, whether it's difference in vacation time, 457 deferred compensation, or the actual classification study expenses, which, again, were pretty close to what we told you last month, about $60,000.
And thank you for accepting it in October instead of in September.
Yeah.
We know you'll find the money.
We had-
And I think Tom made the point that this, as a percentage of salaries, of personnel, is pretty insignificant. I mean, I know it means a lot, but
It does.
But, yeah, in terms of our expenses, it's not a huge ramp up.
Nothing else?
Good, yeah.
Anything else on the agenda?